This is a Film Stories original podcast.
We made this.
Hello and welcome everyone to the X-Cast. The truth is in here. This is our special Fight the Future Minute podcast. I'm Tony Black again, and you are listening to our coverage of minute 111 of the X-Files Fight the Future. This minute begins at 1 hour 50 minutes precisely as Mulder tells Scully what he thinks are some home truths and ends on 1 hour 50 minutes and 59 seconds with Scully saying, if I... That's the beauty of the minute format. Because it means you quite often finish conversations right in the middle of words. And to discuss this gap with me is our returning guest on Fight the Future Minute, X-Cast patron, Caredwen Foley. Maybe we should do that. Maybe we should end this podcast, Caredwen, on us.
Just mid-sentence. We'll just wrap it up that way.
So, they're in mid-conversation anyway, as it turns out, because... As Mulder and Scully are now having this conversation, Scully's found him in the park and they're talking about how, you know, she went to OPR and she gave them this evidence. And he says, you're wasting your time. All right, he's read this article, he's dejected because, I mean, thing is though, I keep thinking, what did he expect? Or did he really expect, like, the newspaper to print what really happened? He seems, like, annoyed that what he's reading is bogus. So, well, obviously, Mulder, of course it is.
I really, I spent a few minutes thinking about this scene last night because, you know, I've often just kind of like glossed through it because at this point you've made it through like the primary action of the movie. But I really spent some time thinking about it because last night it struck me, this is a really disproportionate reaction he's having to, you know, this particular cover-up. And I think I was surprised by how kind of petulant he is at first, especially when, you know, Scully is starting to talk him through, like, what their other courses of action might be. Okay, well, we'll go over their heads. And he just says, no. And he says it in this kind of, like, almost childish way, even though, like, this is the reaction they've always gotten. He just, you know, he came face first with Fluke Man, and he's come face first with the alien bounty hunter, and this is always the reaction he gets, so why is this so different? And then he segues into saying, I'm not going to watch you die because of some hollow personal cause of mine. And it's kind of an astonishingly personal, kind of vulnerable confession, because at first he seems like he's all worked up on principle that, you know, he's angry about this cover-up, but he's way angrier than he is about most of the cover-ups that happen in basically every episode. But it's super personal here. And it's obviously... like, it's clearly a reaction to, you know, what they've just gone through, and he's kind of processing all of the kind of roller coaster of their interactions and her being exposed to this virus and being taken away again and things like that. So that gave me a little bit more of a sense of understanding for, like, why is he being so, you know, a kind of aggressively pissed off that this is the reaction. Yeah. Like, of course this was going to be the reaction, but it's because he's still really scared and is processing a lot of the stuff that's just happened.
Do you think maybe as well it's because he feels like he got close to the truth than ever before this time round, and that it's a little bit like he's extra frustrated because he feels like there was proof close by. A lot of more of the puzzle pieces have kind of been put together for him in terms of what they're actually doing, the scale of it, for the fact that for the first time since, you know, the events of season 2, they seriously took Scully away, and they were going to, well, she would have been dead. They would have killed her essentially. So he's angry at that as well, and that they went that far. So is that what, I mean, obviously, as well as the fact it's a movie and his reactions have got to be bigger anyway, you know, for dramatic effect. Could that be why, do you think?
Yeah, I think that's probably a part of it. I was just thinking about, you know, I think that Colony and Endgame are a really good point of comparison for this.
Yeah, definitely.
And at the end of Endgame, he's like almost, he's quite tranquil. And, you know, there's that kind of touching moment where he says he hasn't found what he's looking for, but he found, you know, the strength to keep looking. And usually that's the note they leave him on. Mulder is sort of a perennial optimist in a way. He doesn't come across that way, but I think there's a real idealism to, you know, to him that I think is why he gets angry sometimes and why he gets petulant sometimes. But yeah, I think that the outside's reaction partly, you know, seems like it's you know, this is a movie and it needs to be a big reaction. But I do think I don't think it's an accident that he kind of culminates his sort of frustration by talking about how he doesn't want to watch her die and he wants her to go be a doctor while she still can. Like, he's a year now removed from Redux and Gethsemane, which was a place where that reaction made complete sense. And now he seems to still really feel like, oh, you're never going to stop being in danger. Like, you've got your health back, but you're never going to stop being in danger because of this relationship, this connection that the two of us have, and that the size of the thing we're pursuing is always going to put you at risk. It just feels very kind of vulnerable that he puts it that way. So I think that's kind of striking. He doesn't do that in Colony and Endgame, even though, like, clearly, you know, it hasn't been on the same scale. But I mean, you know, the alien bounty hunter did throw her through a mirror in that, or throw her through a coffee table in that one. It was pretty bad. But here, I think it's just they've got so much more water under the bridge and so many more years to, you know, to pursue this together. And I think it's that anger comes from a really, you know, a place of real kind of fear and desperation.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And also, I suppose you've got to factor in the fact that and I know there are an equal amount of people who found this groan-worthy and for movie effect, but they almost kissed in this film. As we know, and their relationship is on the verge of becoming more than just friends. You know, it has been for a while. You're going to have, like, in Triangle, you're going to have the kiss and the, you know, I love you and all that kind of thing. You've then got a lot more sort of hints at romance throughout season 6, and then season 7, obviously, it all starts to kick off in that way with those two, and then in season 8 we learn what we learn. But this movie's almost like it's a bit of a bridge for that. You know, this is a really probably the first major moment. And I know there are other theories. I know Sarah Blair has got her theory about how they hooked up in Redux, and you know, it's it's a good theory, Sarah, but I don't know. But there are theories about this, but I think it is a lot more personal, because I think he really is starting to realise that he's in love with her, and it's not just a, you know, their close bond and their friendship and their platonic love, that it is he's in love with this woman, and he's terrified of losing her even more than he thought he was. So I think there is that personalised element, and the fact, like you say, that their relationship has grown. I also think that, and this is something you really see play out in season 6, that he's more jaded about the whole thing now than he used to be. So back in Colony and Endgame, he was still fairly fresh-faced in terms of what he was facing, what he was up against, and he was still, I've got faith to keep looking, and that kind of thing. But since then, he's had multiple, you know, points where he's thought he'd found out about what happened to Samantha and it was snatched away. Things like Paper Hearts and then Redux 2. He's had the whole loss of faith in alien life, which is a wonky storyline, to be fair, but it had an effect, you know, through season 5. And then in season 6, if you remember, by Two Fathers, One Son, he's so apathetic about it all that he's willing to let the colonisation happen. You know, he's like, well, there's nothing we can do. It's, you know, and that is, I remember at the time, and it'll be fascinating to talk about this when we do, but I remember at the time a lot of people were like, well, what's that about? Like, Mulder should be there fighting to stop this, but he's got to a point where he just wants to survive, and he just wants the people he loves to survive. And I think there is a lot of these elements cooking up in the brew here, and with the distance and with the space, I think you really see that come out in this scene in many ways. Fascinating. I hadn't thought of all this until I've unpicked it in this way, you know.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it actually, it kind of traces him down the same road that his father walked down in a way. You know, he recognizes that, like, his idealism dangerous to himself and to the people he loves more critically. And, obviously Bill Mulder takes that in a very different direction than his son does. But yeah, I think that it puts me in mind a little bit of the, when Scully says later on, personal interest is all I have left. I think that's a strain that we've seen pop up. I don't know. I guess we saw it a bit in Piper Maroon Apocrypha too. Just that sense of these huge things have been taken from them, and the more this goes on, the more personal it becomes, and the less idealistic it becomes. And of course, like as we get into seasons 8 and 9, like we're talking about their literal child. It can't get more personal than that. But I think you're right that this constitutes kind of a bridge, both in like their own relationship and in their relationship to the work that they're doing. For exactly the reason. Like I think those trajectories are completely intertwined. And it's interesting too that it also leads into season 6 where we're not following the X-Files. We're following what Darren Mooney likes to call Mulder and Scully go on a season of paranormal dates. Which is, that sounds about right.
I haven't heard him say that, actually.
Yeah, they go like ghost hunting and they go like check out this guy who can control the weather and stuff like that. And every opportunity they get, they hair off from finding people who've, bought a bunch of fertilizer to go like chase ghosts and aliens and stuff. And that's where it becomes the show becomes inseparable from the two of them in the way that the two of them have become inseparable from their work, like within the universe of the X-Files. And, of course, that's why season 9 particularly has so many problems it does. And season 8, for all that I agree, it's a great season of television. It's affected a lot by the fact that, Mulder is missing for so much of it. Because this is where you start to see it pivot from, this story actually can't be about anybody but these two, because they're so wrapped up in it and wrapped up in each other, and that's part of that's just part of the whole thing. That kind of way their personal interest comes to dominate the story and their feelings about the work that they're doing, I think is really important.
And it's funny how when you reach a point of like ending in a way that it always tends to come back to this, like. But by that I mean that when you've got to the end of Fight the Future, it is kind of like the end. It is pretty much literally halfway through the saga of the X-Files, isn't it? Really, the end of season 5 into season 6. That's halfway done. End of Vancouver, so it's a big ending. There's a lot of endings. They're not going back to Vancouver anymore. Well, they are because when they film this, because they're filming it ahead of time. But it's a new setting. It's new kind of storylines. They're going to be off the X-Files for a while, as we later find, but. It's sort of an ending in one sense, and then the next time you get these kind of similar conversations about going and being a doctor and leave this life is Requiem, which was supposed to be the original season 7 was planned for a while as the end, potentially the final episode, and in all intents and purposes, it is the final episode of Mulder and Scully as they were as the show always was until season 10, So, and for a long time, that's what we thought. We didn't know we were going to get season 10 and 11. And for many, many years, in many ways, Requiem was the end of the show as we knew it. And it's why some people try and pretend it is the end of the show. I'm not one of them, but I get why they are in that headspace, because it seems to be, like, in a way, an ending to this story is Mulder giving Scully the choice. And in Requiem, it's taken away from them because he's abducted. Whereas here, she reaffirms, she holds his hand and says, if I quit now, they win. And that they're never going to win because it's the X-Files, but they can only survive and they can only do the best they can together and never apart. Yeah, they
can keep the bad guys from winning, even if they can't win themselves. They can make it costly for the other, for the conspiracy to keep going. I love that. I mean, when she just resolutely tells him, when he tells her to go be a doctor and she says, I can't, I won't. There's just like a lovely sincerity and kind of tenderness to it. And this, this firmness too, that she's not doing this because out of a sense of obligation, and she's not doing this because she was assigned to. time has come and gone. I mean, she made her choice about that, you know, at the beginning of season 2, basically, when they're having their like covert conversations, and she's like angling to try and do autopsies for these like X-Files he's secretly investigating and stuff. You know, she wants to do this, and what they're doing is together. And since then, she has only had more reasons to be committed to it. I really wish they'd followed up on the, you know, it has a cure, you held it in your hand, how many other lives can we save? That would have made a great season 6, huh? That would have made a way better season 7. Yeah, I do like season 6 a lot, but it's so frustrating to see that, you know, they focus on her medical expertise when it's convenient to, and then they kind of forget about it when it's not, or when they have other stories they want to tell. And my goodness, you know, they like, what happened? What are the antibodies in her blood doing right now that she was, you know, healed from this infection, and how could they replicate that, and how can they make sure the syndicate isn't the, you know, sole holder of the vaccine in the United States? I mean, gosh, what a great story that would have been.
It would, and I think you would. It were the X-Files in telling that story now in this kind of space of how television is produced. You might find they would do more of that, because it would be more of a serialized kind of TV show anyway. If we ever do get a reboot, it will be more of a serialized kind of TV show. But they, as well, I think, with the mythology after this, the reason that you get this kind of rousing, you know, how many lives can we save? It's a bit more heroic than you get in the TV show, because they have to, by necessity, be these movie star heroes who are going off to fight the good fight, you know, together. We're the, you know, they are the archetypal heroes, and they go off for the quest. But the reality, when you get back to the TV show, where they don't really have to be like that, it doesn't really go that way. They kind of just end up, the conspiracy sort of just falls apart through not really anything they do, and then it gets far more sort of arcane then, especially when you get to, I mean, I love Biogenesis, that trilogy, but it's weird, and it's nothing like the, you know, the mythology within a year has been transformed, and then within another year it will be completely transformed again. So it never really pays off, does it? The whole how many lives can we save? Because it's not that kind of show, but the movie has to be, in a way. The movie has to have them positioned as, you know, if you ever had Fight the Future 2, they're back, you know, in the hero mold. So I understand why you get that. And it does make for one of the best scenes in the film, and a great scene. It's got some great Mark Snow music as well. It's really quite rousing underneath. But it doesn't quite end this minute, does it? It ends with the middle.
Yeah, I mean, just before we wrap up on it, though, this scene, there's something kind of so delightful about the fact that Scully turns out to be so good at giving pep talks. You know, this is on my mind a little bit, because I just watched The Host last night, and so I've been thinking a lot about that early season 2 period where, like, she's just trying to, like, keep his head in the game and make sure he doesn't give up. And this is such a great little reflection of that. Like, for somebody who was sent to kind of destabilize his work and undermine it, you know, she's his constant kind of source of reinforcement. And she gives him this great, like, sweet little pep talk about, you know, what can we do with this information? How many people can we save? Like, this is my quest. I'm not leaving you behind. And it works, and it works super fast. And at the beginning of this conversation, he's so frustrated and despairing, and he's totally dismissing all the stuff she wants to do. And then by the end of it, he's just looking at her like he's made of jelly. Like, okay, you're right.
maybe this is the Scully effect. You're spot on, though. He just melts, doesn't he? When she says this, he's just, because it's what he needed. It is completely what he needed. He needed to be reminded that this isn't just, it's not his quest anymore. It's theirs. You know, this is their fight. This is their journey. And, you know, by the end of this film, it's a reminder of that. You know, that he is never any good when he's not with her, ever. You know, and then the show reminds us of that time and time and time again. When Scully's not around, he's crap at life.
He just goes to crap.
You know,
and in some ways, it's sort of a nice outlet for the unresolved tension from the hallway conversation too, because in that, like, he's so desperate to have her not leave, and he's so committed to explaining, like, why she's so necessary, and you know, why it's vital for their search, but also for him personally, like, for her to not leave. And you know, you don't get a resolution to that conversation. I mean, we all, like, you know, we talk about how we don't get a resolution to, like, this incipient kiss that's about to happen. But I think what's much more interesting in that is this, like, psychological moment of he's, like, grasping and grasping and grasping, and we don't know what happens after that, because she's not there to continue that emotional interaction. But this is where we see it resolve. This is where we see we're not stopping. We're doing this, you know, we're doing this together, and we're going to keep going. And I'm not going to let you give up, just as you weren't going to let me give up.
It's true. It's true. It's a really good way of looking at that, definitely. And then, yeah, she ends in the middle of she's going to say, it just gets to the, well, we know if I quit now, they win. But, like, we'll get the quit now, they win next minute. But we'll get to that. But it's, we'll leave it there, and it's been great to have you on, Caredwen, for this. I really appreciate you coming on for these minutes and for the minutes you've done before. I will be back for the last few minutes of the movie as we head to Tunisia for the final ominous scene. But that's you all done now for Fight the Future Minute. So why don't you tell everyone, if they want a bit more of what you're up to, where they can find you online?
Sure. Well, you can find me quite often in the XCast Basement Facebook group. And you can also find me on Twitter at Caredwen, Caredwen.
Fantastic. That's brilliant. As I say, thanks for coming on. It's been really nice to do this. And I'll be back for the last few minutes, and we'll wrap up Fight the Future. So until then, always remember, trust elsewhere on We Made This. Motion pictures.
Cinema's reopening here, and they have this list. It's like 450 films or something. You know, you're talking about The Empire Strikes Back, The Shining, or whatever. They've got a big list of what they're allowed to show. And there are some old films on there that are, like, pretty cringy today. Like things like Breakfast at Tiffany's, where you have, I don't know if you've seen that film.
I haven't, no, actually.
Mickey Rooney plays Audrey Hepburn's, like, Japanese neighbour, and it's it's probably one of my least favourite performances ever.
Is this like Laurence Olivier playing the Sudanese like revolutionary in Khartoum in the 60s, where he was black top essentially?
It's terrible. It leans into all the stereotypes.
God. Right in the childhood.
So I've got lots of stuff like The Tripods, Dark Season, Brave Star, Nightmare, Robin of Sherwood, goodness knows what else that I'm going to be bringing to the table.
None of which I've actually heard of. That's
Good.
Not even. I was thinking I'd maybe, like, when we came up with this idea, I thought, I'll know a few. None at all.
So, you know, these are things roughly from 1981 to 1995. Whereas, what are you bringing to the table?
Well, I'm glad you asked. I'm bringing Fairly Odd Parents, Power Rangers, Digimon, Drake and Josh, Recess and Lizzie McGuire for the first few, and then we'll get some more going.
I've heard of Power Rangers.
Yeah. So are you saying you've not heard of these either?
No.
We played this.
So what is it about the Final Fantasy, and especially Final Fantasy VII? What do you like about that series?
There's a lot that I like about the series. I love the system of materia and how you can actually raise that up instead of improving certain stats. Well, you can improve stats as well, but that's not really where the focus is. It's more about getting all of this magical energy up to its highest level, and then it has babies, and you have new ones, and that's so adorable.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.